Hello, my fellow fantasy freaks, geeks, addicts, just everybody out there that watches the show. I want to welcome you to a new segment here on the High Stakes Sports Debates network called Destination Dynasty. First of all, before I get into everything, I just want to say for those of you that did not get a video this week, I do apologize. I was up to my neck, man. I was getting wrung out last week with so many obligations, work. Just people that needed my help with things. I can't understand. You wouldn't be able to understand how much stuff I had going on. But I will get back to those videos. Get back to serving you people out there in the fantasy community. Again, I'm not getting paid for this. I just like doing it. But I want to introduce a new subject now to the YouTube channel called Destination Dynasty. Now, let's start off by talking about what is Dynasty Fantasy Football, because I'm sure a lot of you redrafters out there, and well, for some that don't know what the term redraft means, it's really a dynasty used term to differentiate people that just play regular fantasy leagues where you're redrafting every season. That's essentially what that term means, redraft. Dynasty is you have one snake draft, and that's the very first year of the league. So, you do your random drawing. Oh, I've got the first pick, I've got the last pick. And, you go through your snake, and you make all your picks. Every subsequent year after that, and we'll go into the different types of dynasties, but some dynasties, there are some leftover veterans that get dropped. But in most dynasty football leagues, you are drafting strictly rookies. So, for example, we just had our first rookie draft. We'll call them rookie drafts. We just had our first rookie draft in a dynasty that I personally commissioned. And the number 1 overall pick was Todd Gurley. The number 2 overall pick was Amari Cooper. Number 3 was Melvin Gordon. Number 4 was Kevin White. Number 5 was Devontae Parker. Number 6, someone traded their first rounder and got Forte, which is something you could do. We'll talk about, obviously, all that in future episodes. But I just kind of want to give you guys an intro and a gist of what Dynasty is. Because in my personal opinion, I prefer Dynasty to redraft. There's a dynamic about it that just is so much more rewarding. It really thrusts you into that sort of, I'm an actual GM sort of role, like I'm the general manager of my team, and I got to hit on my draft picks every year. Otherwise, it's bon voyage, man. I'm done. So that's why you also put an emphasis on trading, and we'll get to that later in the series. But what Dynasty Fantasy Football is essentially every year you keep about 80% of your team and you just kind of roll with it and you draft rookies. For example, I was fortunate enough to win the startup year where we're going through a snake. So I had the 12th overall draft selection. Now, unfortunately, the guy I wanted, Dorial Green-Beckham, was taking the pick right before me. So I had to settle for Rashad Perryman, and yes, he's hurt right now, but still a pretty decent talent in my opinion to be able to get that and with the last pick. And another thing about Dynasty, which is huge, this is a worst to first type of league. This is the NFL. Think of it that way. The leagues that I personally am in, it's a 20-man roster. You keep 13 every year. And then every year becomes like the NFL draft. You have 7 rounds from worst to first. There's no snake. So, for example, like I said, I was fortunate enough to win. So every round in that draft, I had the 12th pick. So if you're the first team, you get the first pick in each round. So that's how it goes. You're just going 1 through 12. 1 through 12, 1 through 12, all the way till you get to the bottom of the draft. So it definitely provides an interesting dynamic. Frequently asked questions about Dynasty. Can you trade draft picks? Abso-freaking-lutely you can trade draft picks. One of my favorite parts. Matter of fact, going into the season, listen, I was able to pick up C.J. Anderson, and that's ultimately how I was able to come away with a championship last year. But I had to get better running backs. I had a feeling that C.J. wasn't going to be the guy, so I went out and I traded a guy who was definitely in more of a win future type of situation. His team wasn't so hot. It was very young. Guys like Allen Robinson. This is the guy who took Kevin White. So you've got solid receivers for the future there. He didn't really have a need for Chris Ivory, Mark Ingram. He was looking to build for the future. I gave him my second and third, and he gracefully took that. So there's this interesting dynamic of trading draft picks, which I love. I absolutely love. You're not forced to deal, big-time players for big-time players. If someone's in rebuild, 0-4, 0-5, 1-4, what have you, if they think their season's over, well, they will have an opportunity to assess whether they feel like their current players are worth the draft picks in which you are asking for. So, when we talk about Dynasty fantasy football, again, it's really for the people that love building through rookies. You're thrusting yourself into a GM role, and values are different. I mentioned, you talk about in a redraft, right? Just a regular fantasy league with your buddies. If someone were to trade Jamal Charles for Dorial Green-Beckham, you'd be super suspect about that. You'd either start asking collusion, or what are you smoking? Can I have some of it? Or in this case, I don't want any of it because it just makes you plain stupid. But in Dynasty, that's actually a legitimate trade when you talk about an aging 28-year-old running back for a guy that is very young, has a lot of upside. Again, we throw that term upside around a lot in Dynasty, and upside's very subjective. Keep that in mind, obviously, because, look at guys like Mel Kiper. Oh, yeah, I think RG3 is going to be legit. Or, Skip Bayless. Not that I watch these guys on a consistent basis, but it's hard not to hear when a guy says, I think RG3 is going to be better than Andrew Luck. And while we know Luck's struggling right now, his offensive line's not that great. So, listen, your talent doesn't just disappear after a year. The point is, your talent is very subjective, so you have to be wary about certain trades. But speaking of trading, that's the other way you get your Dynasty roster better. I rarely ever veto trades. I'm the commissioner of a 12-team PPR Dynasty, and for those out there, I totally recommend PPR when you start your Dynasty. I just think Standard's starting to phase out, especially with the league that we live in now, with how pass-happy it is. Also, it's kind of like, if I don't get Adrian Peterson, I'm screwed, just because how little depth there is at running back. For Christ's sakes, Lance Dunbar was, killing it for your squad right now before he got hurt. A buddy of mine, Mark Engelman, actually, was rolling with Lance Dunbar as his RB2, and, with guys like Brandon Marshall and Tom Brady, Julian Edelman, he's the number 2 seed in our league right now. So, unfortunately, he did lose Dunbar, and that does suck. So Dynasty has a lot of different variables, and we're going to go through it as the series progresses. We're going to, talk about certain scenarios, how you should value players going forward. A good buddy of mine, and shout out to Nick Lippa, if you do watch, he got an idea. If you come up with a metric, come up with a scale, a way to value these players, because again, in a redraft, Jamal Charles for Dorial Green-Beckham is absolutely crazy, but in Dynasty, that's a legit trade. Again, in PPR Dynasty, and this is just my advice, you want to build around young or just receivers that catch a lot of passes. Right now, last year, I had Demaryius Thomas, Calvin Johnson, and Martavis Bryant, along with Rob Gronkowski. So obviously, I've got a plethora of catches and a plethora of big play opportunities. I like running backs. Am I using Le'Veon Bell on the number 1 pick in a startup? I'd rather start up with guys like Julio Jones, Antonio Brown, just consistent points for production. So, this was the first episode and many to come. Don't fret, Fantasy First will also be here. I'm sorry I couldn't get a Thursday night video out. I literally just got home from work, and I really want to get this series off the ground. You'll get your Sunday videos. Also, I'm thinking about splitting the Fantasy First podcast into 2 segments now. I realize that recapping the games and then having to quickly go over waiver wire ads, streaming options, because all that's important. Streaming is huge in redraft. So I'm going to split up. I'm going to do 2 podcasts there. If you guys are interested, you can always check it out. Check out Dynasty Nerds. I write for them. Also a great resource. Again, they're part of the reason what sparked my love for Dynasty. I'm addicted to Dynasty. I don't have a love for it. I flat out have a needle in my arm. So yeah, this was the first episode of Destination Dynasty, guys. Please give me your feedback. If we get enough interest, I'd love to start a Dynasty League with anybody out there who's watching that's interested. But Destination Dynasty will now be on the slate along with Fantasy First. So I hope you can handle this ugly mug of mine because you're going to be seeing a lot of it. Seriously. Also, check out the last podcast. I had a really crazy rant about a certain player who I won't name. You'll have to check out the podcast. But I went absolutely crazy. So maybe it could provide you with entertainment or at the very least a good laugh. I know that some people laughed at it. So you can check that out at HighStakesSportsDebates.wordpress.com. Also, the podcast is on iTunes and Stitcher, folks. A little bit easier for you to access, so you can just search High Stakes Sports Debates. Eventually, we're going to get some debates on the show. I'm sure you guys are like, oh, why does this dude call this channel that? It's like, I'm looking for people. I just can't find any, and the show must go on. So I'm trying to find content that you guys value. So keep it locked in. Destination Dynasty, for those who are curious, for current Dynasty players, please, you now have an outlet. And this channel will be going 365 days a year, baby. I don't stop. Off season, I keep going and going and going. I'm the Energizer Bunny, baby. So thank you guys so much for listening. Please follow me at Twitter at SportsDebateTom. I can answer any question you have, or you can ask questions at HighStakesSportsDebates@gmail.com. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Look forward to more Fantasy First, as well as the new episode, Destination Dynasty. We'll catch you guys here next time on the High Stakes Sports Debates Network. My name is Tom Jude. Thank you for stopping by. High Stakes Sports Debates.